Welcome to observational studies versus experiments. So in the previous video, we talked about questions on the relationship between two variables, and we talked about looking just for an observed pattern versus looking for a cause and effect relationship. So an observational study can establish an observed pattern. An observational study simply comes from asking questions or taking measurements, but the researcher themselves doesn't do anything to try to influence the results. So the researcher observes what happens. But does nothing to try to influence the results. Versus in an experiment, the researcher actively essentially prescribes a treatment to try to influence the results. So this can establish a cause and effect relationship. And in this case, the researcher prescribes a treatment to see its impact on the results. So why do we run experiments? We run experiments precisely so that we can look for cause and effect relationships. So to show cause and effect relationships. Why do we run observational studies? They're easier. And when we don't need to establish cause and effect. One thing to watch out for are what are called confounding variables. So confounding variables can make a cause and effect relationship, or make it appear there is a cause and effect relationship when actually something else is causing the problem or causing the pattern. So confounding variables can make it appear like there is a cause and effect relationship. When it is actually a hidden variable by which I mean one not being studied. Causing the pattern. So in the modules, what are we on? Modules 14 and 15, we will focus on how we design a good experiment and just a good study to minimize the effect of other variables that might influence the results. So before ending this video, I just want to do a quick example or two of the difference between an observational study and an experiment. So for an observational study example, we might want to study, say, the influence of uh, the amount of coffee a person drinks, uh, or the influence of coffee on someone's race time on the mile. So if we want to study the relationship between coffee consumption and uh, race time running a mile. What we could do is we could simply ask, did you drink coffee this morning? And then we could time them running a mile. So you will have two groups, those that drank coffee and those that didn't, but the researcher themselves is not the one prescribing the coffee drinking. So you'll have two groups. Group A would be that they drink coffee. Group B would be that they did not. But again, the researcher did not assign these groups. This was just what happened automatically. For an experimental study on the same topic, if we want to know, does drinking coffee in the morning improve race time? Running the mile. Then what we could do is the researcher could tell group A, drink coffee, and group B, don't drink coffee. So the researcher tells group A, whoa, drink coffee. And group B, don't drink coffee. And then times their mile race. So in this case, the researcher had control over their coffee consumption. So the researcher controlled the coffee consumption. So this is the experiment. The researcher had control over who received the treatment, which was in this case drinking coffee. Whereas in the observational study, the researcher just asked who had had coffee. The researcher had no control. So this is observational studies versus experiment.